Day 80, 1 Samuel 21 through 24. Saul pursues David. 21. David at Nob and Gath. 22. David at Adullam and Mizpah. 23. David saves Keilah. Saul pursues David. 24. David spares Saul's life. Chapter 21 through 24. The psalms are sacred songs of worship and praise, written by David and others as emotional responses to crisis experiences. Some of David's most moving psalms flowed from his pen during Saul's murderous pursuit. For an inside look, read Psalms 34, 52, 54, 57, and 142.
Chapter 21. Then David came to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest. And Ahimelech came to meet David trembling, and said to him, Why are you alone, and no man with you? David said to Ahimelech the priest, The king has commanded me a business, and has said to me, Let no man know anything of the business about which I send you, and what I have commanded you. And I have appointed the young men to such and such a place. Now therefore, what is under your hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in my hand, or whatever there is present. The priest answered David and said, There is no common bread under my hand, but there is holy bread, if only the young men have kept themselves from women. David answered the priest and said to him, Of a truth women have been kept from us about these 3 days. When I came out, the vessels of the young men were holy, though it was but a common journey. How much more then today shall their vessels be holy? So the priest gave him holy bread, for there was no bread but the show bread that was taken from before the Lord, to put hot bread in the day when it was taken away. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord, and his name was Doeg the Edomite, the best of the herdsmen who belonged to Saul. David said to Ahimelech, Isn't there here under your hand spear or sword? For I have neither brought my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's business required haste. The priest said, The sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you will take that, take it, for there is no other except that here. David said, There is none like that, give it to me. David arose and fled that day for fear of Saul, and went to Achish the king of Gath. The servants of Achish said to him, Isn't this David the king of the land? Didn't they sing one to another about him in dances, saying, Saul has slain his thousands, David his 10,000s? David laid up these words in his heart, and was very afraid of Achish the king of Gath. He changed his behavior before them, and feigned himself mad in their hands, and scrabbled on the doors of the gate, and let his spittle fall down on his beard. Then Achish said to his servants, Look, you see this man is mad. Why then have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen that you have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house? Chapter 22. David therefore departed from there, and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. Everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was discontented, gathered themselves to him, and he became captain over them. And there were with him about 400 men. David went there to Mizpah of Moab, and he said to the king of Moab, Please let my father and my mother come forth and be with you, until I know what God will do for me. He brought them before the king of Moab, and they lived with him all the while that David was in the stronghold. The prophet Gad said to David, Don't stay in the stronghold, depart, and go into the land of Judah. Then David departed and came into the forest of Hereth. Saul heard that David was discovered, and the men who were with him. Now Saul was sitting in Gibeah under the tamarisk tree in Ramah, with a spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. Saul said to his servants who stood about him, Hear now, you Benjamites. Will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards? will he make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds, that all of you have conspired against me? And there is none who discloses to me when my son makes a league with the son of Jesse. And there is none of you who is sorry for me, or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait, as at this day. Then answered Doeg the Edomite, who stood by the servants of Saul, and said, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech the son of Ahitub. He inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him food, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. Then the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, the priests who were in Nob, and they all came to the king. Saul said, Hear now, you son of Ahitub. He answered, Here I am, Lord. Saul said to him, Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, and that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait, as at this day? Then Ahimelech answered the king and said, Who among all your servants is so faithful as David, who is the king's son-in-law, and is taken into your counsel, and is honorable in your house? Have I today begun to inquire of God for him? Be it far from me. Don't let the king impute anything to his servant, nor to all the house of my father, for your servant knows nothing of all this, less or more. The king said, You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house. The king said to the guard who stood about him, Turn and kill the priest of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew that he fled and didn't disclose it to me. But the servants of the king wouldn't put forth their hand to fall on the priest of the Lord. The king said to Doeg, You turn and fall on the priest. Doeg the Edomite turned, and he fell on the priest, and he killed on that day 85 persons who wore a linen ephod. Nob, the city of the priests, he struck with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and nursing babies, and oxen and donkeys and sheep with the edge of the sword. One of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped, and fled after David. Abiathar told David that Saul had slain the Lord's priest. David said to Abiathar, I knew on that day, when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul, I have caused the death of all the persons of your father's house. Abide with me, don't be afraid, for he who seeks my life seeks your life. With me you shall be in safety. Chapter 23. They told David, saying, Behold, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah, and are robbing the threshing floors. Therefore David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I go and strike these Philistines? The Lord said to David, Go and strike the Philistines, and save Keilah. David's men said to him, Behold, we are afraid here in Judah. How much more if we go to Keilah against the armies of the Philistines? Then David inquired of the Lord yet again. The Lord answered him and said, Arise, go down to Keilah, for I will deliver the Philistines into your hand. David and his men went to Keilah, and fought with the Philistines, and brought away their cattle, and killed them with a great slaughter. So David saved the inhabitants of Keilah. It happened, when Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, fled to David to Keilah, that he came down with an ephod in his hand. It was told Saul that David was come to Keilah. Saul said, God has delivered him into my hand, for he is shut in, by entering into a town that has gates and bars. Saul summoned all the people to war, to go down to Keilah, to besiege David and his men. David knew that Saul was devising mischief against him, and he said to Abiathar the priest, Bring here the ephod. Then David said, O Lord, the God of Israel, your servant has surely heard that Saul seeks to come to Keilah, to destroy this city for my sake. Will the men of Keilah deliver me up into his hand? Will Saul come down as your servant has heard? O Lord, the God of Israel, I beg you, tell your servant. The Lord said, He will come down. Then David said, Will the men of Keilah deliver up me and my men into the hand of Saul? The Lord said, They will deliver you up. Then David and his men, who were about 600, arose and departed out of Keilah, and went wherever they could go. It was told Saul that David was escaped from Keilah, and he gave up going there. David abode in the wilderness in the strongholds, and remained in the hill country in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul sought him every day, but God didn't deliver him into his hand. David saw that Saul had come out to seek his life, and David was in the wilderness of Ziph in the wood. Jonathan, Saul's son, arose and went to David into the wood, and strengthened his hand in God. He said to him, "Don't be afraid, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find you, and you shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you, and that also my father Saul knows." The two made a covenant before the Lord, and David abode in the wood, and Jonathan went to his house. Then came up the Ziphites to Saul to Gibeah, saying, "Doesn't David hide himself with us in the strongholds in the woods, in the hill of Hachilah, which is on the south of the desert? Now therefore, O king, come down, according to all the desire of your soul to come down, and our part shall be to deliver him up to the king's hand." Saul said, "Blessed be you of the Lord, for you have had compassion on me. Please go, make yet more sure, and know and see his place where his haunt is, and who has seen him there, for it is told me that he deals very subtly. See therefore and take knowledge of all the lurking places where he hides himself, and come again to me of a certainty, and I will go with you, and it shall happen, if he be in the land, that I will search him out among all the thousands of Judah." They arose and went to Ziph before Saul, but David and his men were in the wilderness of Maon, in the Arabah, on the south of the desert. Saul and his men went to seek him. They told David when he came down to the rock, and abode in the wilderness of Maon. When Saul heard that, he pursued after David in the wilderness of Maon. Saul went on this side of the mountain, and David and his men on that side of the mountain. And David made haste to get away for fear of Saul, for Saul and his men compassed David and his men round about to take them. But there came a messenger to Saul, saying, "Hurry and come, for the Philistines have made a raid on the land." So Saul returned from pursuing after David, and went against the Philistines. Therefore they called that place Selah Hamalekoth. David went on from there, and lived in the strongholds of En-gedi. Chapter 24. It happened, when Saul was returned from following the Philistines, that it was told him, saying, "Behold, David is in the wilderness of En-gedi." Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel, and went to seek David and his men on the rocks of the wild goats. He came to the sheep pens by the way where there was a cave, and Saul went in to relieve himself. Now David and his men were abiding in the innermost parts of the cave. The men of David said to him, "Behold, the day of which the Lord said to you, Behold, I will deliver your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it shall seem good to you." Then David arose, and cut off the skirt of Saul's robe secretly. It happened afterward that David's heart struck him, because he had cut off Saul's skirt. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to put forth my hand against him, seeing he is the Lord's anointed." So David checked his men with these words, and didn't allow them to rise against Saul. Saul rose up out of the cave and went on his way. David also arose afterward, and went out of the cave, and cried after Saul, saying, "My lord the king." When Saul looked behind him, David bowed with his face to the earth. David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to men's words who say, Behold, David seeks your hurt? Behold, this day your eyes have seen how that the Lord had delivered you into my hand in the cave, and some told me to kill you, but my eyes spared you, and I said, I will not put forth my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. Moreover, my father, look, yes, see the skirt of your robe in my hand, for in that I cut off the skirt of your robe, and didn't kill you. Know you and see that there is neither evil nor disobedience in my hand, and I have not sinned against you, though you hunt after my life to take it. The Lord judge between me and you, and the Lord avenge me of you, but my hand shall not be on you." As says the proverb of the ancients, out of the wicked comes forth wickedness, but my hand shall not be on you. After whom has the king of Israel come out? After whom do you pursue? After a dead dog? After a flea? The Lord therefore be judge, and give sentence between me and you, and see, and plead my cause, and deliver me out of your hand. It came to pass, when David had made an end of speaking these words to Saul, that Saul said, Is this your voice, my son David? Saul lifted up his voice and wept. He said to David, You are more righteous than I, for you have rendered to me good, whereas I have rendered to you evil. You have declared this day how that you have dealt well with me, because when the Lord had delivered me up into your hand, you didn't kill me. For if a man finds his enemy, will he let him go away unharmed? Therefore may the Lord reward you in good for that which you have done to me this day. Now behold, I know that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand. Swear now therefore to me by the Lord, that you will not cut off my seed after me, and that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house. David swore to Saul. Saul went home, but David and his men got them up to the stronghold.